Hello and welcome. Today we delve into a story that could have changed the course of the Pacific War forever. A story of astonishing speed, underestimated power, and strategic surprises. On the morning of July the 20th, 1942, a remote island in the South Pacific was transformed almost overnight from untouched jungle into a battlefield of mind-boggling engineering feats. How did a handful of American workers, armed with just six bulldozers and under 400 men, carve out a 6,000-foot airstrip in less than 3 weeks? Something that normally takes months. Why do Japanese records remain silent about this groundbreaking achievement? While post-war reports reveal they vastly underestimated the industrial might of the Americans. Was the rapid construction of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal merely a coincidence or a glimpse into a new era of warfare where speed and logistics became decisive? And what did this revelation mean for Japanese strategy, forcing them to redirect their entire naval focus with deadly consequences? This story is not just about a single airfield, it's about a powerful, unseen shift in military capability that shattered pre-war expectations and reshaped the entire Pacific theater. The Japanese initially believed that their slow, methodical approach would give them the upper hand. But the Americans' ability to build, upgrade, and operate airfields in record time told a different story, one where industrial strength and engineering prowess could turn the tide of war in weeks, not years. Are the limits of wartime planning and intelligence as fixed as they once seemed? Could a handful of engineers and a few weeks of effort truly redefine strategy? And what if the key to victory or defeat was hidden in these fleeting, almost miraculous moments of construction? In this video, we will uncover how the American engineering marvel on Guadalcanal shattered Japanese assumptions, forcing them to confront a brutal new reality. Their enemy's industrial capacity outpaced expectations by an order of magnitude. We will trace the evolution of Japanese awareness from initial underestimation to a stark recognition that rapid, flexible military infrastructure could dictate the outcome of battles, turning the tide in ways that no battlefield victory alone could achieve. The story begins right now, as we peel back the layers of deception, ingenuity, and strategic shock that define one of the most crucial turning points in Pacific history. Buckle up. The truth is more astonishing than you might imagine. Morning of July 20th, 1942, unfurled in the South Pacific with heat thick enough to weigh down the air, drenching everything in a humid, almost suffocating embrace. Across this vast, tumultuous expanse of ocean and island, an extraordinary transformation was underway on the small but strategically vital island of Espiritu Santo. Mere weeks earlier, the once lush virgin jungle, teeming with vibrant wildlife and dense canopy, had occupied the landscape in an almost untouched serenity. Yet within a span of just 20 days, this scene was utterly transformed. Flashes of machinery and human effort were reshaping the terrain into something completely different, an indication of the relentless march of war. American engineering crews, part of the 3rd Construction Battalion Detachment of the United States Navy, were in the midst of an ambitious project. Using only 6 bulldozers, 2 scrapers, and a force of just under 400 men, they had managed something that ostensibly defied logic and conventional military planning. Their goal was to carve out a robust, preparatory airstrip approximately 6,000 feet in length, an impressive feat of rapid construction, especially considering that traditional military doctrine and experience had dictated such a task would normally take many months to achieve, requiring the coordinated effort of thousands of laborers working in tandem over several seasons. Yet on this day, that expectation was turned on its head. As the dust settled, there was no surviving Japanese record, no diary entry or personal note, documenting this particular moment of breakthrough. History in this case seems to have forgotten any detailed eyewitness account from a Japanese observer who may have witnessed the spectacular progress firsthand. Nevertheless, subsequent intelligence gathered from captured documents, along with post-war interrogations of Japanese officers, would soon reveal that this construction feat was not an isolated anomaly, but a catastrophic oversight by Japanese military strategists. They had vastly underappreciated and underestimated the formidable industrial and engineering capacity of the American forces, a fact that would have profound consequences. Pre-war assessments, culled from translated signals intelligence and military planning documents, specifically the Army Technical Intelligence Service reports, painted a grim picture for the Americans. These projections suggested that the United States would require anything from a year to a dozen months or more to prepare for offensive operations after capturing strategic points. When the Americans, with astonishing speed, demonstrated that they could build and deploy airfields in mere weeks, those assumptions shattered into pieces. The implications of this rapid, highly efficient construction capability extended far beyond a single engineering feat. They fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the Pacific Theater. The story of the Japanese encounter with American construction prowess was largely lost to history through the destruction of most personal records and diaries by wartime fire and chaos. Instead, what survives are fragments, official construction records, intelligence reports, and a handful of war-end Japanese documents that, when pieced together, tell a compelling and sobering tale. These fragments reveal an evolving Japanese awareness that their initial underestimations were catastrophic in scope. Over time, their strategic calculations adjusted as they grew increasingly cognizant of the fact that the United States possessed a war-winning capability, the ability to rapidly build, upgrade, and maintain airfields and military infrastructure in the most challenging of environments. This realization was not merely academic. It carried substantial strategic weight. The story can best be told through a precise focus on observable facts, tangible statistics, and the unmistakable ripple effects these capabilities had on Japanese military decision-making. The impacts were immediate and severe. They forced Japanese commanders to confront a brutal truth: an enemy whose industrial and engineering capacity outstripped their own by an order of magnitude they had never envisioned. This revelation was perhaps even more devastating than a battlefield defeat, as it foretold the enduring difficulty of defeating an adversary capable of such rapid and sustained logistical support. The initial encounter with American military construction might be most famously associated with the Guadalcanal campaign. Yet at that stage, the Japanese did not fully grasp the scope or the strategic significance of what they were witnessing. When Marines landed at Lunga Point on August the 7th, 1942, they encountered a nearly completed Japanese airfield, Henderson Field, whose construction was accelerated by force of necessity. The Japanese had deployed a labor force totaling over 2,700 crew members, comprising Japanese personnel, Korean laborers, and local civilians, who in just over a month managed to complete the aerodrome. Within a mere 6 days of their initial landing, American forces had achieved operational control of the field, transforming it into an essential forward base for aerial operations. Equipped with only a modest team of 458 men from the 6th Naval Construction Battalion, alongside 5 officers, the Americans arrived at what was initially a Japanese construction project and quickly took measures to expand and improve its facilities. They undertook additions and repairs under intense daily enemy fire. Japanese forces operating from nearby Rabaul launched relentless attacks, specifically daily noon raids by Mitsubishi G4 M-Betty bombers. And yet, despite this relentless, the evolving Japanese military strategy increasingly reflected a growing recognition of the crucial role that rapid construction and maintenance capabilities played in the modern battlefield. Such realization was vividly exemplified by Admiral Yamamoto's decisive shift in operational priorities for the Imperial Japanese Navy. Traditionally, the fleet's primary mission was to support ground operations directly, but in the context of new fast-moving developments, Yamamoto understood that demolishing Henderson Field held greater strategic significance. Consequently, he directed the combined fleet to shift its focus from supporting land campaigns to a singular mission aimed at the destruction of Henderson, an airfield that had become a pivotal obstacle. This redirection was driven by the importance of Henderson Field, a small but strategically vital airbase that severely threatened Japanese logistical and operational flexibility. The Japanese Navy's response to the threat posed by Henderson was the launching of highly efficient, high-speed destroyer runs, known historically as the Tokyo Express. These swift naval sorties were primarily designed to deliver supplies and reinforcements, but had severe limitations. They could carry only a limited amount of supplies and were powerless to deliver heavy equipment or large-scale reinforcements. This method was born out of necessity, a direct countermeasure to the presence of the well-entrenched airfield that pinched Japanese supply lines and threatened their logistic flow. What made this adjustment even more consequential was the realization that a relatively simple, rapidly constructed airfield could drastically alter the course of the campaign. Henderson Field's swift construction and continuous professional maintenance essentially forced Japanese logistics to adapt swiftly, contributing directly to the Japanese forces' gradual starvation on Guadalcanal, an outcome that would lead inexorably to their defeat. The construction of this aerodrome, accomplished in a matter of weeks, exemplified a paradigm shift in military logistics and air power projection that the Japanese had grossly underestimated. This strategic misjudgment was vividly exemplified during the first significant Japanese counterattack against Henderson, led by Colonel Konawachiki. Confident that his force of approximately 917 men could recapture the airfield, Ichiki set out to launch what was intended to be a decisive assault. His troops believed they besieged a weakly defended position, one that they assumed was only partially finished and lightly held. The Japanese high command shared similar expectations, anticipating a comparatively easy victory, given their belief that the airfield was not yet fully operational. However, the disastrous outcome of the Battle of the Tainaru on August 21, 1942, sharply contradicted these assumptions. Ichiki's forces were completely annihilated, with casualties totaling nearly the entire force. Though the officers' personal records were destroyed during the battle, captured operational orders from Ichiki's command indicate a critical lack of appreciation for the American engineering and construction capabilities. The Japanese forces entering the fight expected to face an incomplete or lightly defended installation, yet upon arrival, they discovered a fully functional and heavily defended airbase, already hosting 31 Marine aircraft. The significance of this discovery was not lost on the American defenders. The commanding general, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, who led the Japanese 17th Army, conducted 3 major attempts between August and November of the same year to retake Henderson. Each of these assaults was based on the mistaken assumption that any significant damage inflicted upon the airfield would take weeks to repair, thus buying Japan valuable time to regroup or prepare renewed efforts. For instance, after the October naval bombardment, considered the most intense of the campaign, the Japanese strategists estimated that the airfield would be out of commission for at least an entire week, providing a false sense of security. Yet reality proved far more ruthless. American engineers and personnel, pressed into urgent action, managed to repair the damage within a matter of hours, turning the airfield into operational status again with startling rapidity. This profound misunderstanding of American capabilities had ripple effects, forcing the Japanese to reassess their assumptions about the speed at which the Allies could restore damaged infrastructure. Such surprises gradually shifted strategic calculations and committed Japanese planners to a more cautious and increasingly desperate approach. By 1943, as U.S. forces advanced into the Central Pacific, the disparity in construction speed and logistical support became glaringly apparent, deeply impacting Japanese defensive planning. One of the most striking demonstrations of American construction prowess occurred during the Battle of Tarawa, fought from November 20th to the 23rd, 1943. The United States Navy's 74th Naval Construction Battalion, also known as the Seabees, landed with the Marines in this amphibious assault, tasked with rapidly establishing an airfield that would support the ongoing campaign. The Japanese defenders, comprising approximately 5,000 troops drawn from the 3rd Special Naval Landing Force and the 7th CISBO Special Naval Landing Force, had invested months in fortifying Betio Island. Through manual labor and strategic planning, they managed to construct a 4,500-foot-long airstrip, a project that took many months of relentless effort to complete. Remarkably, the highly fortified and heavily defended Japanese airfield on Betio was taking recent advances in military technology, and engineering meant that American forces had dramatically increased their ability to dominate the skies over acquired territories within a matter of days rather than weeks or months. An operational paradigm shift that underscored the rapidity and efficiency of their logistical and construction capabilities. This emerging reality was vividly illustrated during the operations conducted in the Marshall Islands early in 1944, which reinforced just how profound this transformation had become and how swiftly the United States had adapted to the demands of modern warfare. During these campaign efforts, the complex task of transforming captured enemy-held facilities into functional military bases was undertaken with remarkable skill and speed. At a strategic location known as Quadraline, the United States Marine Corps 121st Construction Battalion embarked on a significant mission, converting the remnants of Japanese installations into a major aviation hub that could support ongoing and future military operations. While combat actions still raged in other areas, the importance of this effort extended well beyond the fighting. It exemplified the capability of American engineering units to rapidly establish critical infrastructure. More notably, at the same time, the 110th Naval Construction Battalion undertook the crucial job of rehabilitating a heavily damaged Japanese runway. Their work resulted in the creation of a bomber strip that stretched an impressive 6,800 feet, enabling B-24 Liberator bombers to launch offensive missions against strategic Japanese positions, particularly the fortified stronghold at Truk. Such a feat was not merely a matter of laying asphalt. It involved transforming battlefield devastation into an operationally vital asset within a blisteringly brief span. The significant disparity between Japanese wartime intelligence estimates and the reality of American industrial and military strength is well documented in recently translated documents located within the archives of the National Institute for Defense Studies. Japanese officials prior to the outbreak of hostilities had grossly underestimated the scope of American construction and logistical production. Their calculations anticipated the United States would build only about 5 million tons of merchant shipping in 1943. However, the actual figure reached a staggering 19.2 million tons, an underestimate by nearly 400%. Similarly, their estimates of U.S. naval personnel strength fell far short of the actual figures. Japanese intelligence believed the U.S. Navy at that time would comprise approximately 13,070 officers, accompanied by just under 300,000 enlisted men, by the end of the year 1943. In reality, the United States Navy boasted over 219,279 officers, with approximately 120,472 officer candidates, and more than 234,343 enlisted personnel, values that exceeded Japanese expectations by more than sevenfold. Despite these clear gaps in intelligence, perhaps the most influential failure was in misunderstanding American capabilities related to construction and engineering. Orientation manuals, espionage reports, and captured training documents from the Japanese military consistently attributed considerable delays and logistical challenges to rapid airfield infrastructure development. Their doctrine envisioned construction projects of weeks or months, processes requiring extensive manual labor and static, slow-moving procedures. The Japanese military constructed their doctrines based on the assumption that units like the 17th CB Battalion, operating in the Solomon Islands, could only rely on rudimentary tools, shovels, limited hoses, and a scarce number of rollers, lacking anticipation of the mechanized force that American engineering units could and did deploy. The Japanese could not comprehend how American aviation construction battalions soon arrived with an astonishing array of over 140 vehicles and more than 200 construction machines operational at any given time. This mechanized force fundamentally shattered the Japanese notion of construction limits, transforming the long-standing, manual-heavy approach into a rapid, mechanized operation capable of producing entire runways, hangars, and support facilities in a fraction of the time it would have taken previously. This clear technological and strategic advantage became acutely visible during the campaign in the Mariana Islands in the summer of 1944, a series of operations that dramatically highlighted the yawning gap in construction capability. The strategic significance of this disparity was evident in the British and Japanese assessments of the upcoming battles. These islands would soon serve as crucial bases for American B-29 Superfortress bombers, long-range aircraft capable of striking across the Pacific and into the heart of Japan itself. For the Japanese military, commanded by Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Seitito of the 43rd Division stationed on Saipan, the rapid American buildup was nothing short of alarming and unprecedented within their wartime experience. The fall of Saipan's primary airfield, known as Asto, occurred swiftly on June the 18th, 1944, only 3 days following the initial invasion. American engineering units, notably the 3rd Battalion of the 20th Marines, alongside the 121st and 18th Construction Battalions, achieved what was previously thought impossible. They had the airfield operational and ready to support P-47 Thunderbolt fighters within just 4 days of the landing. As the intense ground fighting persisted in the northern mountainous regions of the island, the construction teams continued their work, expanding the airfield to accommodate the massive B-29 bombers that Commander recognized the incredible speed of the American engineering efforts. Noting that what had taken Japanese forces months to establish was now being revitalized and expanded within a matter of days. This rapid transformation was nothing short of extraordinary, revealing the stark contrast between the two militaries' priorities and capabilities. While the Japanese relied heavily on traditional notions of bravery and the warrior spirit, embodied in their concept of Yamato Damashii, the Americans demonstrated an unparalleled ability to combine technical ingenuity with combat effectiveness in a way that left the Japanese astonished. The keystone of this operational prowess was the work of the United States Navy's construction battalions, commonly known as the Seabees. Established with a mission to build and repair essential military infrastructure swiftly, these units pushed the boundaries of military engineering in the Pacific theater. On Saipan, and especially on Tinian, they executed engineering projects on a scale and with a speed that was previously thought impossible. In particular, the transformation of Tinian from a relatively undeveloped island into one of the largest and most sophisticated bomber bases in human history remains a testament to their expertise. During the period stretching from mid-1944 to mid-1945, the 6th Naval Construction Brigade, which was composed of approximately 15,000 sailors-hardened engineers, carried out an astounding feat that profoundly impacted the outcome of the Pacific War. Their task was to construct infrastructure capable of supporting the massive B-29 Superfortress bombers, which carried the strategic weight of the American effort against Japan. The statistics stand as remarkable even by today's standards. A detailed account from the Naval Construction Battalion records confirms that these servicemen carved out runway networks from the jungle and coral, creating 6 large airstrips that stretched over 7,000 feet in length each, with the Northfield Airfield featuring 4 parallel runways designed to facilitate simultaneous launch operations. Each of these runways was constructed with meticulous precision, enabling the B-29s to take off for their 3,000-mile bombing missions with consistent reliability. The total amount of coral processed, hauled, blasted, and packed was equivalent to filling the immense Hoover Dam 3 times over. To put this into perspective, it underscores the unbelievable quantity of materials handled in such a short span of time, transforming raw coral and earth into man-made runways capable of supporting the heaviest and most advanced aircraft of the age. The endeavor involved ships, bulldozers, and teams of engineers who meticulously leveled and hardened the surface, often working around the clock to meet the aggressive deadlines set by American military planners. Commanded by Colonel Kiyoshi Ogata, Japanese forces on Tinian numbered roughly 9,000 troops, most of whom were compelled to fight to the last man during the island's fierce defense. Despite their efforts, the rapid development of American infrastructure was evident from the outset. As early as August 1st, just a week after the initial American landings on July 24th, engineers had already begun repairing and expanding the former Japanese fighter strip at Northfield. Their ability to move swiftly and build under fire highlighted an essential gap between the Japanese approach and that of the American engineers. While Japanese military doctrine emphasized the cultivation of the warrior spirit and the idea of fighting with unwavering bravery, the Americans demonstrated a flexible approach, fighting both in combat and while constructing vital infrastructure, often simultaneously. The Japanese, relying on months of labor from forced workers brought from Chamorros and Korea, had initially constructed their airfields utilizing traditional methods, carefully burying their laborers in the hard rocky soil to conceal their activities. The transitions and developments that followed, however, as seasoned American engineers touched down and began their work, were nothing short of revolutionary. The capturing of Tinian's strategic airfields and the subsequent rapid expansion made it clear that the American approach to military engineering had fundamentally changed the paradigm of war logistics, melted down pure necessity into unprecedented feats of organization, sophistication, and speed. The sheer scale of what was achieved on Tinian has rarely been matched. To this day, historians note that the combined effort of building such extensive runway networks, fortified at various points to accommodate the largest aircraft of the era, ranks among the most extraordinary feats of military engineering ever undertaken. These military facilities would go on to support countless bombing missions that severely degraded Japanese industrial capabilities, hastening the end of the war and marking a turning point in military technology and engineering. The lessons learned from these engineering triumphs underscored the importance of adaptability, speed, and technical prowess in modern warfare, qualities that the Americans wielded with extraordinary effectiveness during this pivotal campaign. The detailed engineering documentation from Tinian, translated by ATIS, meticulously outlined their construction techniques employed during the island's fortification efforts. The report described a labor-intensive approach, primarily relying on manual methods. Coral was crushed by hand, concrete was mixed painstakingly with manual tools, and work was conducted using basic implements such as picks and shovels. This laborious process underscored the significant physical effort involved in constructing the defensive infrastructure, which was carried out with minimal mechanization at that time. The report included an estimate that expanding the existing runway by just 1,000 feet would necessitate around 1,000 workers operating for approximately 2 months to complete such an extension. In striking contrast, American forces, specifically the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, demonstrated a dramatically different level of construction efficiency on Tinian. They managed to extend the island's runways by 4,000 feet in less than 30 days, showcasing a swift, large-scale engineering capability that surpassed Japanese efforts not only in speed but also in scale. The extraordinary construction capacity exhibited by the Americans during this campaign may have had profound psychological repercussions on the surviving Japanese personnel, as inferred from prisoner interrogations conducted by the Office of Naval Intelligence. Although these interrogations primarily aimed to gather military intelligence and did not specifically focus on the technical details of construction, several prisoners independently expressed their surprise and awe at the technological superiority manifested by the American forces. One captured member of an American naval construction unit eloquently expressed the disparity by stating, "We could not compete with the U.S. Navy method that used bulldozers and power shovels versus our method that used shovels and scoops operated by humans." This stark comparison revealed not only the technological gap, but also the strategic advantage conferred by advanced mechanical equipment, which enabled the Americans to accelerate their engineering projects and support military operations more effectively. A pivotal figure in understanding the broader context of Japanese industrial and construction capabilities was Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who commanded the Japanese garrison on Owima. His unique background, including service as a military attaché in Washington, D.C., served from 1928 to 1930, and extensive travels throughout the United States, provided him with invaluable insights into American technological and industrial prowess. His personal correspondence, later published as Pictures from the Commander-in-Chief, offers some of the rarest Japanese perspectives on American logistical and engineering capabilities during the war. On February 19, 1945, when American Marines launched their assault on Owima, Kuribayashi commanded approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders. He had dedicated months prior to the invasion to fortifying the island, transforming it into a secured underground fortress. Skilled Japanese construction troops excavated over 11 miles of tunnels, subterranean command posts, and concealed artillery positions. This extensive subterranean infrastructure represented one of the most ambitious and comprehensive Japanese engineering projects of the entire war, embodying months of meticulous planning and labor. The American military response to these fortifications demonstrated a divergent philosophy centered on rapid deployment and mechanical advantage. Unlike the Japanese emphasis on concealment and extensive underground construction, the Americans prioritized speed and efficiency, leveraging modern machinery and industrial techniques. Key to this effort were the 31st and 133rd Naval Construction Battalions, which arrived with the assault waves and undertook the rapid building and repair of critical infrastructure. The 133rd Naval Construction Battalion, in particular, attached to the 4th Marine Division, experienced the highest casualties among the naval construction battalions during this operation, suffering 40 killed, 156 wounded, and 48 evacuated due to sickness out of an estimated 1,100 men. Despite these losses, ongoing combat conditions, and relentless enemy resistance, their work proceeded at an astonishing pace that would have been inconceivable to Japanese engineers operating with traditional manual methods. Within days of landing, the American engineers were already repairing damaged Japanese airfields to support ongoing military operations. By the 26th of February, just 1 week following the initial landings, American aircraft, including an OY-1 artillery spotter plane, successfully landed on the hastily repaired airfield. The rapid restoration of infrastructure was instrumental in maintaining air superiority and supporting the steadily intensifying assault on the island. Meanwhile, by the 4th of March, even amid fierce fighting, the first B-29 Superfortress made an emergency landing on Iwima. The aircraft, part of the 9th Bombardment Group, had been damaged during an attack over Tokyo and was unable to return to base. The swiftly repaired airfield was a critical factor in saving both the aircraft and its crew, exemplifying the effectiveness and speed of American construction methods. Regrettably, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi did not live long enough to witness the culmination of these engineering feats or reflect directly on American construction capabilities. He lost his life in the final Japanese assault on Ma, marking the end of his leadership and insight into the war's extensive technical and industrial dimensions. His death symbolized the tragic costs of a protracted conflict where tactical ingenuity and industrial strength on April 1st, 1945, swiftly secured key strategic locations, including the vital airfields at Kadena and Yontan, which the Japanese had, for some inexplicable reason, left largely undefended and vulnerable to invasion. In a matter of hours, the advancing American troops managed to seize these crucial sites, their rapidity of progress fundamentally surprising many, including the Japanese commanders who had underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of the American military machine. By the time April 3rd arrived, the battered but resourceful engineers from the CBS unit of the 58th Battalion, alongside the 1,900 1st Aviation Engineer Battalion, had already begun repairing and extending both of these significant airstrips, transforming them into operational bases. The urgency and scale of their efforts were remarkable. Within just a week, American fighter aircraft were already taking off from these airfields, providing essential close air support to the ongoing ground operations on the island. This rapid turnaround allowed American forces not only to establish air superiority, but also to maintain a sustained offensive. What followed was an unprecedented and extraordinary construction effort that confounded Japanese expectations. Over time, a staggering number of approximately 95,000 Army and Navy construction personnel would be engaged in transforming the island. Their mission was expansive, to create facilities capable of supporting 4,000 operational aircraft, indeed a monumental task. To achieve this, teams from the 8th, 10th, 70th, and 11th Naval Construction Brigades would build far more than just runways and hangars. They would construct comprehensive military infrastructure. This included entire port facilities capable of handling supply ships carrying vital war materials, ammunition dumps essential for sustained combat, hospitals to treat the wounded, and vast supply depots to sustain the campaign. In essence, they were erecting what could be described as a sprawling, highly organized military city directly in the heart of Okinawa, an undertaking that, in both scale and complexity, had never been seen before in a battlefield environment. During the ongoing conflict, Yahara's memoir sheds light on his increasingly growing awareness of the overwhelming American construction superiority. However, he tends to emphasize the tactical and strategic implications of these feats rather than delve into specific engineering details. Throughout the operation, Yahara observed that American forces were not only able to rapidly seize territory, but also appeared to possess an extraordinary capability for on-the-spot engineering and facility construction that vastly outmatched Japanese expectations. This observation highlights how their organizational cohesion, technical prowess, and relentless determination allowed them to turn even the most challenging environments into formidable bases optimized for offensive operations. To those witnessing it, this relentless, steady development seemed almost impossible to thwart, cementing the recognition that American logistical and engineering capacities had evolved to an unprecedented level, opening new horizons in modern warfare and battlefield innovation. In the course of military operations, the United States was able to swiftly establish operational bases that outpaced the ability of Japanese forces to launch effective counterattacks. The account of the Japanese offensive on April 19th vividly illustrates how futile it was to attack American positions that were being continuously reinforced through the rapid construction of new facilities and supply depots. These efforts created a logistical and military advantage that the Japanese could hardly hope to match. Yahara, a witness to these events, perhaps understood on some level a most fundamental difference in military philosophy, even if he could not fully articulate it at the time. What he observed hints at a deeper, underlying contrast. The Japanese military tradition placed immense emphasis on the spiritual component of warfare. The warrior spirit and belief that such areta could prevail despite material shortages and disadvantages. This ideology valued moral and spiritual resolve as a critical element of combat effectiveness. In contrast, American military doctrine prioritized a different set of principles, an ethos where muscle and manufacture worked hand in hand to produce overwhelming combat power. The U.S. military's approach integrated industrial capacity directly into their operational strategy, allowing for the rapid mass production and deployment of equipment, infrastructure, and personnel. These differences in strategic mindset formed the bedrock of their contrasting capabilities on the battlefield. One of the most tangible manifestations of this disparity was seen in the composition and use of combat engineers. For example, the combat engineers, often known by the acronym CBS, possessed versatile skills that blended soldierly combat prowess with civilian construction expertise. These American engineers were equally adept at wielding rifles as they were at operating bulldozers, seamlessly switching between combat and construction roles depending on the needs of the moment. Their organizational structure provided a direct and efficient linkage between civilian construction skills and military operations, enabling them to expedite the construction of vital facilities under enemy fire and challenging conditions. The Japanese military, on the other hand, lacked a comparable force. Their construction units were significantly less capable in this regard. They relied largely on military engineers, equipped with limited machinery, or on civilian laborers who served as conscripts. These civilian workers, while vital for labor, generally lacked any significant combat training or operational capability. When the Japanese 17th Set Thai units were captured in the Solomon Islands, interrogations revealed their members had neither had formal combat training nor possessed substantial equipment. They were essentially unarmed laborers, not the highly skilled warrior builders that American professionals like those in the CBS represented. The true extent of the Japanese intelligence failure regarding American construction prowess only became transparently clear after World War II ended. A comprehensive strategic bombing survey conducted between 1945 and 1946 involved extensive interrogations of captured Japanese military and civilian officials. This careful process, including translations of captured documents facilitated by the Army Technical Intelligence Service, ATIS, shed new light on how profoundly Japanese planners had misunderstood and underestimated American industrial and construction capacity. Among the revelations was the admission by Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukuoka, who served as the Chief of Staff of the Japanese Combined Fleet during the war and later commanded the Japanese Second Air Fleet. During post-war interrogations, Admiral Fukuoka acknowledged that Japanese naval planning had never envisioned the speed and efficiency with which the Americans could build military bases. Pre-war Japanese military doctrine assumed that capturing an island would provide a defensible position, one that could be held for months, patiently waiting for reinforcements to arrive. This approach was rooted in the belief that fortifying such positions would buy critical time against counterattacks. However, the American ability to transform captured islands into fully operational and strategic offensive bases within only days or weeks completely undermined this long-standing strategic concept. The numbers involved in American construction projects vividly illustrate this massive intelligence failure. For example, Japanese planners had estimated that constructing a 6,000-foot runway capable of accommodating heavy bombers would require 3,000 to 5,000 laborers working diligently for a period of 3 to 6 months. In reality, American combat engineers completed a comparable project in just 20 days, employing only about 1,100 men. This striking 5 to 6-fold efficiency advantage, combined with the American capacity to deploy multiple construction battalions simultaneously onto different islands, enabled rapid infrastructure development far beyond Japanese expectations. American construction proceeded at a pace that seemed almost miraculous to Japanese planners, who had traditionally believed such projects would take months or even years. The technological and equipment gap was equally significant. A single D8 bulldozer could move more earth in a single hour than 300 manual laborers could shift in an entire day. By the year 1944, American forces in the Pacific Theater possessed hundreds of these powerful machines, which dramatically increased their construction and logistical capabilities. In stark contrast, the Japanese had scarce resources in this domain. Their bulldozers and heavy equipment were so limited that captured American machinery became highly prized, regarded almost as rare treasures above nearly any other form of war material. The Japanese military's lack of heavy construction machinery, in comparison to the robust and rapidly mobilized American fleet, of the disparity in construction capabilities between the Japanese and American forces, represented a deeper divide rooted in contrasting industrial, organizational, and cultural paradigms. While Japanese military construction practices continued largely to rely on time-honored methods borrowed from their civilian sectors, the American approach epitomized the full embrace of industrialization within military engineering. Japanese military construction workflows were fundamentally traditional, grounded in established civilian techniques that had existed long before wartime demands intensified. Their reliance on manual labor, workers wielding picks, shovels, and transporting materials using human-powered methods, reflected multiple underlying issues. These included shortages of specialized equipment and machinery, but this approach also remained deeply embedded in the Japanese military ethos. It emphasized qualities such as spiritual resilience and physical endurance, viewing manual labor not merely as a logistical necessity, but as an essential element of character building and spiritual discipline. Under this worldview, endurance and devotion during construction reflected values that aligned with Japan's broader cultural and military doctrines, focused on inner strength and perseverance. In stark contrast, American military construction efforts exemplified outright industrialization. U.S. construction units, often called the Corps of Building Service, CBS, were drawn from the ranks of civilian construction contractors who brought decades of professional experience from the commercial sector. These individuals seamlessly integrated industrial techniques directly into military operations. Their approach was characterized by systematic planning, efficiency, and innovation, traits that stood out amid the often improvisational Japanese methods. American engineers and builders applied principles such as detailed time and motion studies, rigorous equipment maintenance schedules, and the use of standardized procedures. These practices, common in civilian construction industries, allowed American forces to execute projects with remarkable speed and consistency across vastly different locations. Prefabrication, a hallmark of American industrial methods, enabled the mass production of construction components like master matting, prefabricated huts known as Quonset units, and standardized fuel tanks. These were manufactured en masse in American factories, then shipped as complete, ready-to-install systems, dramatically reducing construction time and logistical complexity. Japanese construction, on the other hand, predominantly relied on local materials tailored to each individual project. Their method of custom construction limited their ability to replicate successful infrastructure rapidly across multiple sites. Consequently, American engineering efforts, quick, uniform, and prefabricated, proved to be far more efficient and scalable, allowing for faster deployment of critical infrastructure like airfields and supply depots. The biological and psychological effects of witnessing this stark contrast in construction productivity left an undeniable, if hard to measure, imprint on Japanese forces. Accounts from prisoners, intercepted letters, most of which had been censored, And post-war testimonies, albeit limited and lacking highly personal perspectives, collectively suggest a narrative arc. The initial reaction was one of confidence, built on the Japanese military doctrine of Yamato Damashi, or the Japanese spirit, an ideology that asserted spiritual resilience and inner strength could compensate for material shortcomings. Early successes, such as the attack on Pearl Harbor and rapid territorial gains, seemed to validate this belief, reinforcing the idea that superior morale and fighting spirit could outmatch material disadvantages. However, as the war progressed and encounters with constructed American military facilities unfolded at key locations like Guadalcanal, cracks in this confidence began to show. The rapid and resilient completion of Henderson Field, despite intense bombardments, demonstrated a capability far beyond mere physical or material advantage. It signaled a formidable organizational and technological capacity that Japanese forces could neither replicate nor counter effectively. By the year of 1943, prisoner interrogations became increasingly revealing of a mounting realization among Japanese soldiers and officers. Captured members of their construction units openly expressed astonishment at the sophistication and speed of American equipment and techniques. The strategic implications of this construction superiority were not lost on Japanese field commanders, who recognized that American military engineering was providing a decisive edge. One telling indicator of this was how quickly American-made airfields could be made operational, sometimes within mere days of completion, giving them an unmistakable advantage in aircraft deployment and logistical support throughout the Pacific theater. In summary, the evolution of Japanese military perception of American construction capacities encapsulated a broader unfolding story. At first, there was a firm belief rooted in cultural ideology that spirit and resilience would carry them through. Yet as the tangible evidence of American industrial might became undeniable through the swift construction of vital military infrastructure, that confidence dwindled into confusion and eventually into a sense of despair. This erosion of morale was underpinned by the realization that material and technological superiority, manifest through rapid, standardized, and efficient construction, held the key to overcoming the seemingly invincible, spirit-dependent methods long praised by Japanese military doctrine. With each strategic victory, captured territory transitioned from mere ground gains into crucial leverage points for future attacks, effectively transforming the battlefield. The meticulously devised defensive lines, initially intended to drain American forces through prolonged sieges and defensive standstills, eventually proved to be ineffective in preventing a relentless advance. This failure was largely due to the Allied forces' innovative approach to logistical support, the rapid construction of new bases. These bases served as critical stepping stones, enabling a swift island-hopping campaign that systematically bypassed heavily fortified Japanese positions, undermining their defensive strategy and eroding their morale. By the year of 1944, this shift in military tactics and infrastructure expansion began to leave a profound psychological impact on Japan's highest military and civilian leadership, instilling a sense of vulnerability and inevitability about their eventual defeat. The fall of the island of Saipan, a pivotal event, marked a crucial turning point. Its capture had immense strategic significance because it brought Japan squarely within the striking distance of the United States' formidable B-29 Superfortress bombers. This geographical advantage directly threatened the Japanese mainland itself, forcing the government under Prime Minister Hideki Tojo to crumble under mounting pressure. Military commanders and political leaders recognized that the American ability to rapidly construct and expand operational bases meant that each lost island no longer served merely as a territorial loss, but transformed into a fresh platform for immediate offensive operations against Japan. This realization was reinforced by the rapid pace of construction on Tinian and Saipan, where enormous B-29 bases were erected far more swiftly than Japan could develop and deploy adequate countermeasures, dramatically altering the strategic landscape of the Pacific War. As the conflict wore on into its final stages, a pronounced sense of despair became palpable in Japan's defensive preparations. Instead of defending the beaches at Iwo Jima and Okinawa with the hope of repelling invading forces, the Japanese military adopted a grim strategy, fighting from fortified positions positioned inland. This approach reflected a sobering recognition that American forces would inevitably establish beachheads regardless of initial resistance and would immediately begin transforming captured islands into bases capable of launching assaults against the mainland. The shift was stark, emphasizing not just the importance of repelling invasions, but rather inflicting maximum casualties and attrition on the attacking troops. It was a calculated effort to make any advancing American force financially and physically costly, in the hope that protracted and bloody battles would undermine political will and lead to negotiations for peace. The overarching strategic impact of American construction capabilities, embodied notably by the development of the Central Base System, CBS, had a profound effect on the course of the Pacific War. This was far from a simple matter of building bases at a faster rate. It represented a revolutionary change in how military campaigns could be conducted. The island-hopping strategy, which relied on bypassing heavily defended Japanese strongholds and instead seizing less fortified islands for immediate construction of airfields and support facilities, was only feasible because of the Allied powers' unparalleled ability to rapidly undertake large-scale construction projects. Admiral Chester Nimitz's bold decision to circumvent the formidable Japanese fortress Rabaul in New Britain exemplifies this shift in tactics. Instead of engaging catastrophic battles at Rabaul itself, U.S. forces relied on swiftly establishing air bases on surrounding islands, neutralizing Rabaul through sustained aerial dominance rather than prolonged ground combat. The temporal compression of the Pacific Campaign was extraordinary. Pre-war Japanese plans had assumed that such an offensive would necessitate years of deliberate, well-planned advance, with intermittent lulls to construct the necessary logistical and operational bases. The reality, however, was starkly different. Over a span of less than 3 years, from the initial assault at Guadalcanal through to the decisive Battle of Okinawa, American forces advanced over 3,000 miles across the ocean, laying the groundwork for each subsequent move with astonishing speed. Every newly captured island became a strategic aid, quickly transformed into a forward base supporting the next phase of the campaign, creating a domino effect of rapid military progression. Meanwhile, there existed a significant chasm between the realities witnessed by Japanese military personnel on the ground and the information that was disseminated to civilians and officials back home. Wartime censorship in Japan was extensive and meticulous, effectively controlling the flow of information related to American construction efforts, industrial output, and technological superiority. Letters sent home by soldiers were subjected to rigorous censorship, with references to American-built equipment, the pace of construction, and the strength of Allied logistics routinely erased to maintain morale and prevent panic or disaffection. The few uncensored letters that did escape, mostly those sent to foreign contacts or that had not reached Japanese authorities, paint a picture of widespread amazement among Japanese soldiers regarding the scale and efficiency of American military and industrial capabilities. Yet despite these evident successes in material and logistical achievements, Japanese propaganda endeavored to distort and belittle these facts. Official narratives portrayed Americans as spiritually weak, overly dependent on material resources, and lacking in the martial virtues traditionally celebrated in Japanese wartime ideals. This disconnect between the reality on the ground and the portrayals reaching in the midst of relentless warfare, a profound disparity existed between the perceived strengths of the Japanese and the considerable material and logistical superiority of the American military forces. Despite the severe hardships faced during combat, the Japanese had long harbored a romanticized belief in their own warrior spirit, a fierce code of honor, and spiritual resilience that they thought would carry them through any hardship. Meanwhile, broadcasts from Radio Tokyo, carefully monitored and translated by American intelligence agencies, played a strategic psychological game. These reports repeatedly emphasized the supposed spiritual superiority of the Japanese soldier over unfaltering American materialism, attempting to bolster morale and maintain national pride amidst adversity. However, the stark reality on the battlefield and behind the scenes painted a different picture altogether. For the Japanese civilians, the information they received was heavily biased and often distorted to maintain hope and faith in their military efforts. The dramatic falls of key locations like Saipan, which appeared in Japanese media as valiant, desperate stands by brave defenders celebrated as heroic deeds against overwhelming odds, obscured the fact that American forces had already secured operational B-29 bomber bases while the fighting was still ongoing. This vital strategic detail was deliberately concealed, leaving the Japanese people unaware of the full scope of their enemy's advances. Similarly, the rapid gallop of the American armies through the Philippine Islands was attributed mainly to their larger numbers rather than to swiftly establish critical support bases, an accomplishment achieved at a speed previously thought impossible. This misinformation and lack of accurate intelligence had significant strategic consequences, fostering a false sense of security among the Japanese populace. Up until the late months of 1944, Japanese civilians remained relatively optimistic and resolved in their belief that their defenses were holding strong, despite mounting evidence that the tide of the war was turning decisively against them. One of the most bewildering phenomena to the Japanese was the sudden appearance in reach of American bombers, which seemed to effortlessly traverse the vast distance to reach Japan itself. This mystified many civilians because they could not understand how the United States could have developed flying machines capable of striking so deep inland when the Japanese still believed their defensive perimeter was intact. The answer lay in the extraordinary achievements of American ingenuity and engineering. Behind the scenes, American construction battalions, soldiers dedicated to building essential military infrastructure, had been rapidly constructing massive air-based complexes on captured islands, often within a few months. These bases provided a crucial launch pad for precision strikes and reconnaissance capabilities that seemed almost to appear out of nowhere. The complete record of American construction efforts during the Pacific Campaign offers striking insight into how thoroughly Japan's strategic position had been undermined by the war's end. By the concluding months, the Allied buildup had transformed the entire Pacific region into an interconnected network of military bases deeply embedded across numerous islands. Especially noteworthy is that, in total, American construction battalion units, the famed CBS, peaked at an impressive 325,000 soldiers, with 80% serving directly in the Pacific Theater of Operations. These men were responsible for erecting a staggering span of 111 major airstrips, each capable of supporting critical air operations, as well as 441 piers designed for transports and logistics. Their engineering feats extended far beyond runways. They also built enormous ammunition magazines, warehouses encompassing over 700 city blocks, extensive housing facilities accommodating approximately 1,500,000 military personnel, and sophisticated fuel storage tanks holding upwards of 100 million gallons of fuel to sustain continuous operations in the vast oceanic environment. On as many as 300 different islands, these construction units established outposts that formed the backbone of America's relentless push westward. The scope of the equipment utilized during this colossal construction drive was equally staggering. Over 50,000 bulldozers, manufactured by the well-known Caterpillar Company, were produced throughout the war, with numerous units deployed specifically to the Pacific Islands. The Caterpillar D7 bulldozer, often called the workhorse of Pacific construction, embodied the technological leaps made. It weighed around 10,500 pounds and had a drawbar pull capable of exerting 25,000 pounds of force, enabling it to level terrain and prepare runways with remarkable speed and efficiency. In stark contrast, Japanese forces lacked anything comparable in scale or technological innovation. One of the most revolutionary developments was the use of pierced steel planking, known as men matting, which completely transformed the construction of airfields. Each mat measured approximately 10 feet in length and 15 inches in width, weighed about 66 pounds, and contained 87 drainage holes to facilitate quick installation and effective runoff. As early as 1943, American factories had supplied enough of this master matting, an aggregate amount equivalent to 240 runways measuring 1,500 by 50,000 feet, to support a massive expansion of airfield capacity. This prefabricated runway material was engineered for rapid deployment, capable of transforming an open area of land into a fully operational airstrip within hours instead of days. The total production of this steel matting during the war surpassed 2 million tons, which was roughly equivalent to The remarkable rapidity with which American military engineers accomplished construction projects throughout the Pacific Theater left an indelible impression, both during and after the conflict. Their ability to complete extensive infrastructure in astonishingly short time frames continually broke previous records, underscoring the extraordinary efficiency and skill of U.S. engineering units engaged in these efforts. For instance, during July of the year 1942, American engineers set an early and impressive benchmark by completing the construction of an airstrip at the island of Espiritu Santo in just 20 days, an achievement that captivated military observers and demonstrated the potential for rapid airfield development under combat conditions. As the war progressed, these feats of engineering became increasingly impressive, and by 1943, the pace had only escalated further. The 47th Naval Construction Battalion, a highly trained and specialized unit, successfully built a runway extending approximately 3,300 feet in length on the remote island of Vangunu in an astonishing period of only 9 days. This achievement not only exemplified the rapid construction capabilities at the disposal of the Allied forces, but also highlighted how logistical and engineering efficiency could be harnessed to front-load the Pacific Campaign with crucial support infrastructure. In November of 1943, a particularly striking demonstration of Allied construction prowess occurred on the island of Tarawa, where a devastated airfield was rehabilitated in merely 15 hours, a feat that showcased the near-instantaneous turnaround of Japanese-occupied facilities now reclaimed by American forces. This rapid repair process transformed previously unusable airstrips into operational bases almost immediately, thus allowing for continued aerial assaults and logistics and significantly shortening the time window for establishing air superiority in contested regions. The island of Tinian, located in the Mariana Islands, provided a testament to the enormous scale and sophistication of American military engineering efforts. Within less than a year, approximately 15,000 men from the Construction Battalion, colloquially known as CBS, constructed what was then the world's most extensive airbase complex. The project included the laying of 4 parallel runways, each measuring around 8,500 feet in length, capable of supporting the takeoff and landing operations of 100 B-29 superfortresses daily. This feat was not merely a matter of engineering, but also a strategic game-changer. Such an enormous airbase held the power to deliver a level of destructive force to Japan greater than the entire Japanese military might could muster in its defense. The transformation of Okinawa epitomized the rapid expansion and intensification of Allied engineering endeavors. Rooted in strategic necessity, the plans for Okinawa's infrastructure aimed to support a force of about 4,000 aircraft, a number surpassing Japan's remaining entire operational air fleet at the time. The extensive development included port facilities capable of handling the invasion fleet, enabling the amphibious assault, alongside ammunition depots intended for the forthcoming campaign against Japan, hospitals prepared for the inevitable casualties, and large supply depots designed to sustain millions of troops involved. When Japan capitulated, these extensive projects, encompassing immense quantities of construction materials and labor, stood as a testament to the relentless preparation underway. Ultimately, the 55,000 construction personnel on Okinawa had built an integrated logistical and operational framework for what would have been the final and decisive invasion of the Japanese home islands. Most senior Japanese officers who observed the scope, speed, and precision of American construction operations did not survive the war, but the evidence they left behind paints a compelling picture of how the Japanese military perceived and comprehended their adversaries' capabilities. American construction records provide detailed, precise timelines, offering quantifiable insight into the rapid pace of development and statistical data that underscore just how quickly objectives were achieved. Meanwhile, Japanese strategic decision-making gradually revealed a growing realization of the importance of such capabilities. Despite the scarcity of surviving Japanese testimonies, the fragments available demonstrate a mixture of professional astonishment and strategic despair. Colonel Hirami Yahara, a survivor of the Pacific battles who later authored a memoir, stands as one of the most significant witnesses to these developments. Yahara's account of the Battle of Okinawa recounts American construction efforts as proceeding with mechanical efficiency and sheer relentless precision. He observed that American engineers sometimes worked more than a half-mile ahead of advancing Marine and Army units, engaged in surveying operations under constant threat of enemy fire. These teams would operate deep within no man's land, meticulously marking locations for future construction, often without pause or respite, while under attack from Japanese forces. His post-war evaluation further acknowledged that the formidable American construction capabilities rendered Japanese defensive positions increasingly untenable. The enemy's material and infrastructural superiority, especially in engineering and logistics, meant that any Japanese position abandoned was quickly transformed into a new launching point for further American advances. This ominous realization, though it arrived too late to influence Japanese military strategy, demonstrates that at least some Japanese officers understood the growing significance of American construction and logistical superiority. Captain Riki Inaguchi, who served as a senior staff officer under Admiral Onishi, creator of Japan's kamikaze program, survived the conflict and later provided important insights, remarkable speed and efficiency with which the United States had transformed the nature of Pacific warfare. Their ability to swiftly establish and expand air bases across newly captured islands had rendered previous naval strategies largely obsolete, forcing a fundamental reassessment of defensive tactics. Every island that fell into American hands immediately became a forward operating base, extending American air power further westward at an unprecedented pace. This rapid expansion dramatically compressed the defensive perimeter, creating a threat that Japanese forces struggled to counteract effectively before their enemies could adapt to the new realities of warfare. The American capability to project power across vast distances in the Pacific was no longer dependent on traditional naval dominance alone, but was now heavily reliant on the rapid construction of airfield infrastructure that could support sustained aerial operations. According to the most comprehensive insights into Japanese construction capabilities during this period, the perspective is best drawn from the engineers who were directly involved in building fortifications, rather than from military officers overseeing broader strategic operations. Post-war interrogations with surviving members of these Japanese engineering units reveal an almost unanimous sense of professional astonishment at the technological and logistical methods employed by the Americans. Among these accounts, one engineer, belonging to the 17th set, whose name has not been preserved in historical records, remarked that observing American construction efforts was akin to witnessing a glimpse into the future. The engineer described how American machines performed, in just a matter of hours, tasks that would have taken his unit weeks if attempted manually using traditional methods. This astonishing efficiency was more than mere individual anecdote. It signified a profound shift in understanding and strategic assessment. The Japanese had come to realize that the Americans' ability to rapidly build and bolster their bases was so advanced that defending the beaches and initial landing sites in places like Iwima and Okinawa was essentially futile. Consequently, Japan adapted its defensive doctrine. Instead of defending every inch of coastline, it concentrated its efforts on fighting from well-prepared, entrenched positions further inland. This shift in tactics reflected an acute awareness that American forces would inevitably establish beachhead support facilities, regardless of initial resistance, and that the focus should instead be on delaying and inflicting casualties beyond the beaches, rather than attempting to prevent the base's construction altogether. This change in Japanese strategic thinking underscored their recognition that territorial defense alone was insufficient when faced with such formidable construction capabilities. It was understood that the Americans would not be deterred by initial landings, but would instead quickly develop the necessary infrastructure to sustain and expand their military operations in the region. The kamikaze program itself can be interpreted, in part, as a desperate response to this new challenge. Under traditional naval aviation paradigms, operational success depended heavily on well-established, secure bases, comprehensive maintenance facilities, and trained ground crews. As the Americans systematically built extensive base networks moving ever closer to the Japanese homeland, these vital supporting structures in Japan were gradually destroyed. In this context, kamikaze attacks, requiring only one-way fuel and minimal maintenance, represented an attempt to prolong aerial operations without the infrastructure that modern, conventional aircraft needed to operate effectively. Captured Japanese intelligence documents from the post-war period further illuminate their efforts to develop countermeasures against American construction prowess. These plans included deploying specialized infiltration units tasked with sabotaging construction equipment and assassinating key personnel involved in building American bases. There were even proposals to use chemical weapons to contaminate or destroy infrastructure at critical sites. However, despite these efforts, none of these strategies were effectively implemented on a wide scale. The Japanese's inability to carry out these schemes successfully reflected both structural weaknesses within their military network and the robust security measures employed by American forces to prevent sabotage. By the year of 1945, the final Japanese Homeland Defense plans explicitly acknowledged the formidable nature of American construction capabilities. These plans assumed that any American landing would ensure the rapid and extensive development of major base installations, regardless of Japanese resistance. The Japanese strategy thus evolved from attempting to prevent the establishment of these installations to trying to exhaust the invading forces by forcing them to build their bases over Japanese dead, hoping that the resulting casualties and destruction would induce negotiations for peace rather than unconditional surrender. It was a calculated, albeit desperate effort to manipulate American strategic patience through attrition. Furthermore, by late 1944, high-ranking Japanese military leaders had begun to fully realize the strategic significance of American construction skills. Still, this awareness arrived too late to significantly alter the course of the hostilities. Their understanding of the peril posed by the American capacity for rapid base building highlighted how the very foundations of Pacific combat had shifted, making previous doctrines inadequate. This late recognition underscored the overarching lesson of the Pacific conflict, that technological innovation and logistical ingenuity could decisively reshape the battlefield, demanding flexibility, foresight, and adaptation at the highest levels of military planning, capabilities that Japan was increasingly unable to marshal in the face of the relentless American advance. The turning point in the trajectory of the Pacific War was significantly marked by the fall of the Tojo government, a political upheaval that directly reflected Japan's recognition of its increasingly precarious strategic position. The loss of the island of Saipan had further elucidated this reality, demonstrating that the United States' burgeoning air power, particularly the deployment of B-29 superfortresses, would soon pose an ever-present threat to the Japanese mainland. This realization did not merely represent a tactical setback, but indicated a profound acknowledgement within the highest levels of Japanese military and political leadership that their homeland was increasingly vulnerable to sustained, overwhelming strategic bombardment. Consequently, Tokyo and its command centers grasped the magnitude of the emerging danger, that American air bases, once established on critical Pacific islands, would serve as launch pads for a relentless assault on Japan itself. In response, Japanese military strategists and commanders signaled their understanding of this looming threat through actions that revealed a recognition of the strategic importance of construction efforts undertaken by their adversaries. One notable instance was the fierce, desperate defense of the island of Iwama, where Japanese forces endured some of the highest casualties inflicted on American troops in the entire Pacific theater. Their resistance was driven by a calculated awareness. The airfields that the Americans were rapidly building on that small island would in the near future be pivotal for supporting fighter escorts for the B-29 bombers attacking Japan's core territories. This recognition underscored the understanding that the American construction of military infrastructure was not just a logistical feat, but a strategic catalyst that could ricochet across the entire theater, tipping the balance irreversibly. Lieutenant General Kurabayashi's strategic choice to abandon traditional and often desperate banzai charges in favor of a more measured, deliberate defense further exemplified this acknowledgement. His decision hinted at an acute grasp that, regardless of how bravely Japanese forces fought, the consequence of formidable airfield development by Americans, inevitable and unstoppable, would be to ensure valuable American air power could operate with increasing ease over Japanese-held territory. Kurabayashi's tactics aimed to stretch American resources and morale, knowing well that key infrastructure, such as airfields, would be constructed regardless of Japanese opposition. Similarly, the Japanese defense on Okinawa vividly displayed their deep understanding that the island would soon transition into a crucial American military base. Their strategy was, therefore, to prolong the clash as much as possible, knowing that even as kamikaze tactics inflicted severe damage on American naval forces, a desperate effort to delay inevitable American dominance, the ultimate goal was recognition that the island's strategic utility for the Americans could not be thwarted indefinitely. This reflected a broader Japanese strategy of acknowledging the reality of militarized industrial capacity, even while fighting tooth and nail. One of the most explicit reflections of this systemic recognition was Colonel Yahara's carefully crafted defensive plan. This plan did not seek to prevent the Americans from establishing airfields and port facilities, a practically impossible goal, but instead focused on making such construction efforts as costly and difficult as possible. This approach encapsulated a fundamental understanding that the Americans would eventually succeed in their engineering endeavors, and the objective shifted to delaying and complicating the process to inflict maximum logistical and human costs on American forces. The evolution of Japanese strategic responses, from initial surprise, through grasping the scope of American construction capabilities, to strategic adaptation, demonstrates that they recognize the significance of engineering and infrastructure development as critical components of American military superiority. Despite the loss of detailed documentation and personal testimonies, the broad strokes of this realization are evident in the pattern of Japanese actions. These responses, encoded in strategic decisions and military tactics, serve as a form of historical testimony, an indirect record, affirming that Japanese forces did in fact comprehend and react to the rising capacity of American military construction. In examining this history, it becomes clear that the stories of Japanese encounters with the United States' rapid and industrialized construction efforts are better told through a mosaic of statistics, strategic moves, and documented outcomes rather than mere personal recollections or emotional accounts. The destruction of many Japanese records over the course of the war, coupled with the limited survival of individual testimonies, leaves a gap in understanding the personal experiences of soldiers and officers. Nevertheless, the surviving evidence, a combination of construction data, strategic plans, limited personal accounts, and post-war studies, produces a compelling narrative of an enemy gradually realizing the magnitude and implications of American industrial capacity. What Japanese forces witnessed was unprecedented in the annals of military history. The full-scale industrialization of wartime construction, which revolutionized operational speed and strategic reach. The rapid and astonishing engineering feats, such as the construction of the Astral Sito Sano airstrip within just 20 days. The remarkable 15-hour turnaround to restore the Tarawa airfield's operational capability after its destruction, and the massive buildup of B-29 bases on Tinian amidst ongoing battles, were beyond traditional military engineering achievements. These feats embodied the rapid surge of American military-industrial strength, illustrating a level of organizational and technological superiority that rendered Japanese defeat. The immense industrial power of the American forces was not merely a reflection of their military might, but a testament to their capacity to project industrial strength across vast oceanic distances. Instead of traditional troop deployments or battlefield maneuvers, the Americans relied heavily on mechanized infrastructure, bulldozers, prefabricated materials, and rapid construction techniques that transformed the Pacific theater into a chessboard of swift and overwhelming industrial progress. Every Japanese defensive position, painstakingly constructed over many months through relentless manual labor, could be matched or surpassed by American engineers within mere days or a few weeks, dramatically shifting the strategic balance. This rapid construction capability had a profound impact on the course of the war. It facilitated the acclaimed island-hopping strategy by allowing the Allies to swiftly establish new bases that bypassed heavily fortified Japanese positions. What had previously taken years of effort could now be achieved within a fraction of that time, effectively compressing the timeline of the American advance across the Pacific from years into just a few months. In doing so, it truncated the Japanese defensive campaign and shortened the war's duration, forcing Japan into an increasingly desperate position. Furthermore, The swift emergence of American military bases brought the Japanese civilian and military planners to the unsettling realization that their islands could be subjected to strategic bombing much sooner than anticipated. The rapid deployment of airfields within striking distance was not merely a matter of tactical advantage, but a clear indication that the Pacific War had evolved into a competition of industrial systems, rather than just troop numbers or battlefield heroism. In that contest, the United States far outpaced Japan, whose industrial capacity had been comparatively limited and less adaptable to such rapid mobilization. Survivors' testimonies from Japanese officials and soldiers consistently echo a sense of astonishment at the speed and scale of American construction efforts. The impressive effectiveness of American equipment and engineering speed caused growing concern and contributed to strategic reconsiderations. During the final stages of the war, Japanese defenses at places like Eniwetok and Okinawa acknowledged the inevitability of American-based construction. They understood that regardless of their resistance, the Allied forces would continue to build new bases rapidly, effectively eroding Japan's defensive perimeters. The Japanese response to this industrial onslaught was deeply asymmetrical. The kamikaze tactics, aimed at inflicting maximum damage on American naval and air forces, represented an effort to compensate for material and industrial disadvantages through desperate, sacrificial assaults. However, these measures could not address the fundamental imbalance, the sheer industrial superiority of the Americans. The story of the Pacific War culminates not with heroic last stands or dramatic testimonials about the impossible feats of American construction, but with Japan's strategic surrender, acknowledging the overwhelming reality of American industrial dominance. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito's surrender speech subtly referenced the advent of a new era marked by an overwhelmingly destructive bomb. While focusing on the bomb's terrifying power, the emperor also recognized that the war's developments had shifted beyond Japan's manipulation or control. His remarks hinted at a broader acceptance that the updated military landscape was one where American forces could project their industrial capabilities across the Pacific at unprecedented speeds and scales, rendering continued resistance futile. This restrained acknowledgement implicitly conveyed that the fate of Japan had long been sealed, not just by the formidable American military forces, but by their readiness to deploy vast industrial resources instantly and efficiently. The motto of the American combat engineers, "Constantly do, we build, we fight," eloquently encapsulated this new approach to warfare. In particular, the remarkable ability of these engineers to construct military infrastructure under fire at industrial speeds seemed almost like confronting the future head-on. For the Japanese, observing this relentless industrial capability must have felt like witnessing the future of warfare itself, an era where spiritual resolve alone could no longer withstand the relentless advance of mechanized power, prefabricated strength, and industrial organization. The construction of airstrips, such as those 6,000-foot-long runways completed within 20 days, became metaphors for this new kind of warfare. These feats of engineering transcended mere technical achievement. They symbolized a paradigm shift. Japanese military traditions, built on valor and manual efforts, struggled to comprehend a conflict in which aggression was backed by relentless, mechanized construction and industrial output. The story of Japanese encounters with American industrial prowess is less about the words spoken or promises made, and more about the concrete actions taken, actions that spoke louder than any battle cry or official document. These strategic adaptations, these defensive reconfigurations, testify to a growing awareness within Japan that they were not merely fighting a conventional enemy, but confronting an industrial system of unprecedented scale. Their defensive adjustments, whether in fortified islands or in the desperate last-ditch assaults, ultimately reflected a reluctant recognition of defeat. These actions conveyed a crucial message. Military virtues alone, no matter how bravely exhibited, could not match the unstoppable momentum of an industrialized war machine. The legacy of this clash between traditional militarism and industrialized warfare extended well beyond the end of World War II. The demonstration of America's ability to industrialize military construction so dramatically marked a turning point. The phenomenon pioneered by the construction battalions of the United States Navy, famously known as the Seabees, in the Pacific Theater became an indelible element of modern warfare strategies. Their swift ability to establish advanced military bases, to extend logistical networks across sprawling oceanic expanses, and to construct infrastructure at a pace that often outstripped their enemy's capacity for destruction, not only marked a technological breakthrough, but also redefined the very nature of combat operations. These capabilities, which first bewildered and astonished the Japanese forces observing the rapid development of airfields, harbors, and supply depots in the Pacific, remain foundational to military planning and strategy even many decades later. For historians and scholars delving into the intricacies of this era, one of the most poignant frustrations lies in the scarcity of Japanese perspectives on these extraordinary construction feats of the Americans. Official documentation from the enemy side is sparse, offering limited insight into their first-hand reactions or understanding of what was unfolding around them. This lack of detailed personal accounts makes it challenging to fully appreciate the emotional gravity and strategic shock experienced by the Japanese troops. Nonetheless, it serves as a stark reminder that the course of history is often shaped by technological capabilities and organizational systems that those involved may not immediately comprehend or fully document at the time. The Japanese forces, who witnessed the relentless speed with which American engineers transformed jungle and coral islands into fully operational airfields and permanent bases, were witnessing a revolutionary step forward in military affairs. To see airstrips emerge seemingly overnight, prepared in mere days rather than weeks or months, was an impressive spectacle that highlighted the evolution of wartime engineering. These representatives of Japanese military traditions, perhaps lacking the conceptual frameworks or technical vocabulary to articulate such advanced construction methods or their broader implications, recognized only the immediate impact on their operational capabilities. As the historical record shows through statistics accumulated over the years, the scale and speed of these construction efforts were monumental. The construction of over 110 major airstrips, nearly 400 smaller landing and patrol bases, and facilities capable of supporting a formidable force of approximately 1.5 million soldiers. These achievements did more than just expand American military reach. They fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Pacific War. For the Japanese personnel observing these developments firsthand, witnessing bases rise swiftly from the dense jungle or reef, these numbers represented volumes more than simple data points. They embodied the future of warfare itself, realized in a time frame that had once been deemed impossible within the constraints of traditional military methods. The speed and efficiency of American construction transcended mere statistics, symbolizing a radical transformation in how military power could be projected and sustained across great distances. This sweeping transformation profoundly impacted the course of the conflict in the Pacific, making American logistical and engineering prowess a decisive factor in their eventual victory. Although Japanese forces often matched or even surpassed American troops in terms of tactical skill and valor, they found themselves uniquely disadvantaged by an industrial and organizational system capable of converting captured islands into highly functional and offensive military bases with an unparalleled speed. This industrial superiority, epitomized by the remarkable achievements of the Seabees and their ability to establish complex infrastructure in record time, proved repeatedly to be just as crucial as battlefield success. In doing so, the industrial and logistical capabilities represented by these construction efforts embodied a form of strategic dominance that was as influential as any major naval engagement or ground battle. The speed and scale at which these bases were built, across vast stretches of ocean and difficult terrain, secured a future in which aerial supremacy, rapid troop deployment, and sustained supply lines became operational realities. In essence, these extraordinary feats in construction and logistical organization significantly shaped not only the outcome of the Pacific War, but also the modern principles of military engineering that continue to influence armed conflicts to this day.